Thank you very much. I'm trying to start early so that my colleagues who said they'd come and heckle don't get a chance to join in. So good afternoon, and thank you very much for sticking with us. I know it's Friday afternoon. It was a long day yesterday. I was in this room opening with one of the panel sessions yesterday, and we had some sort of lively exchanges and ideas about what we're currently doing. I want to take a slightly different tack and talk to you about some of the problems we've got. We've got some significant issues in terms of how we're trying to use and manage mixed reality in the business that I'm proud to be part of. I should level with you. I'm a medical person. My first degree is in occupational hygiene. I have a particular interest in sort of risk management, and I'm a chartered safety engineer. So this area of trying to manage the risk associated with mixed reality in an industrial context has sort of, it's evolved over the last 2 years, really, as far as the UK is concerned. And the regulators, both in Europe and in the UK, are slowly sort of catching up with what's happening out there in the industrial environment. So a little bit about Welsh Water then. So we're a not-for-profit water and sewage company in Wales in the UK. We have 3.1 million customers and around 3,500 colleagues who work for us. Of note, I guess, as far as risk management is concerned, is we get about 1 million visitors a year to our assets. So that's members of the public. And on top of that, we have around 70,000 school children joining us as well. And any of you who work with school-aged children or have got school-aged children know how difficult behavior is in terms of their predictability. And so they will often do things which are unusual and unexpected. And from a risk management point of view, that's very difficult to deal with. We have a large coastline which causes us it's very beautiful, but in terms of environmental permitting and how we use the technology to try and minimize the risk to the environment, it's a fairly big challenge for us. Around 4,500 kilometres of coastline and an awful lot of blue phalag beaches. So we're pretty famous for our sort of surfing and bathing water quality as well. Of note, though, is the investment we put back into the assets. So at the moment, we're investing around 1.3, looking to be 1.4 million pound a day back into our operational assets. So when we maybe talk later around return on investment, you can bear that in mind in terms of the actual investment we're doing on a day-on-day basis. We have won some awards for our innovation. 2017 and 2018, we won UK-wide innovation awards. And this year we were shortlisted for a different award. We didn't win next year, so the pressure's on my team to deliver for 2020. So I'm not sure if I can build that into their PMR or objectives or anything, but we're very proud of what we do, and we like to share the best practice. This picture is, I didn't have a chance to put the video in because I had to submit the presentation a couple of weeks ago. But this is our 360 VR pod. And it gives you an idea about some of the innovation we're doing in terms of developing VR. So we use wireframe 3D point clouds for visualization of our assets. But on top of that, we've just started to work with a company called Cognica, and we're using, essentially, it's a sort of Google Earth type mapping process, but down to a resolution of 10 centimeters squared. So we're mapping the assets down to 10 centimeters squared so that we can actually then drill into and behind the wireframe to actually pull out significant operational information about the asset. And in reality, if you were inside this pod, you could go up to the information panel, which has appeared on the left-hand side, interact with it, and it would pull back the operating information around that piece of equipment or that asset. So it may be maintenance records or emergency procedures or dosing parameters, whatever it may be. And this happens to be one of our wastewater treatment works. So our primary mixed reality product is a thing called the iWOM. So if you have a look at my page on LinkedIn or the Dwr Cymru website, you'll see a little around the iWOM and the innovation that we've delivered with this. It's designed to deliver complex operating instructions to skilled and semi-skilled operators in very adverse environments. So if you can imagine, it's very dark, it's Wales, so it's pouring with rain, you may be underground or inside a chamber, and you're presented with an emergency scenario in which you have to operate a series of valves or commands in a particular sequence to avoid catastrophic loss of the asset or disabling the water supply to our customers or creating a toxic glass cloud that may injure yourself or your colleagues. So the IWOM is designed to deliver that information to you using augmented reality. And previously, it was basically a paper-based system. So there'd be an emergency, somebody would go for the paper manual, the O&M manual, start to rip through it, look for the information, but that would take minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, however long it took to actually gather that piece of information. So it presents all of those bits of information, really, which are around the critical safety parameters. We use VR an awful lot, so sitting behind each of the IWOMs is a VR or wireframe model, and I think we've got a little video clip of a fly-through just to give you an idea about some of the resolution we're dealing with as well. The AR, as I say, is being used to deliver information about the plant and the operating parameters. We're doing some work, as I sort of showed you earlier, in terms of that innovation sliding with mixed reality, and there's user acceptance testing ongoing at the moment. We think it's probably a better way of delivering some of the core information to employees than even a high-resolution wireframe model. But as I say, we'll be monitoring that over the next sort of 6 months or so. We use GPS for point of interest mapping, but obviously inside buildings or underground, that really doesn't work. So we're back to NFC and QR data retrieval, so we're asset tagging where we need to. We've seen some great improvements with edgeless marker tracking as far as AR is concerned. So we use Wikitude as our base frame for AR, and later releases of Wikitude have really improved their edgeless marker tracking, even in low light environments. So that's been a real bonus for us, and we've moved away from some of the tracker boards that we needed to use elsewhere on the operational assets. Importantly for us, we're a not-for-profit company, so we have no shareholders. So the money that we get from customers and from the regulators, we plough back into the business. So we're not beholden to shareholders. So essentially what we do is for the benefit of our customers and our business customers in Wales. Challenges. I've been to a number of talks over the last couple of days, and everyone is very buoyant about what's happening, and people are very good at telling you what they've done and how good they are. But perhaps I'm going to be slightly controversial and present to you some of the problems and challenges we've had and see whether collectively any of you have got any ideas about how we might actually overcome them. For me, the honeymoon phase is definitely over. We've been doing this process for a number of years now, and what I can't guarantee is getting more project funding for the same sort of things. So people are no longer interested in AR overlays on critical valves or instrumentation or whatever it may be. We need to try and drive that step to the next step. We've become victims of our own success, really. So internal stakeholders are demanding more and more from us. And to an extent, we're struggling to keep up to date with information. I'll jump around a little bit. I haven't got a word missing there about industrial hardware. I was trying to think of a word that I could politely insert into a slide for mixed company. But my view is industrial hardware is lacking, not innovating. I am struggling to come up with something new to be able to deliver the excellent content that we have within the business. We've made a change internally. We were set on APK, so we were using Android platform in both wearable devices and with ruggedized tablets. Earlier this year, we made a well-reasoned security shift, and now I've been presented with the challenge of trying to deliver all of our AR elements in both iOS, macOS, Windows, and Android, and that's actually pretty complicated. I think we may have a solution. We're thinking about using Microsoft Intune as our content management layer. And nobody's sunk their head desperately to say that's a terrible idea, but I have been talking to people over the last couple of days. So we think that that may well work or may well help us in terms of trying to deliver that information into our operators and into the business. And the other area for us all probably is around security concerns. So a lot of the information we have is on critical infrastructure, which is governed by UK security requirements. So we have to be very careful about what's actually happening there. I was hoping to be able to talk about HL2, but I can't, because I don't know any more than probably anyone else in the room. When we spoke to Microsoft earlier and we placed our provisional orders, we were told that the device would be here at the sort of end of last month, early this month, but we still haven't really got any information, so I don't know whether anyone knows any different. But we're thinking that HL2 may well be a step in the right direction as far as some of our applications are concerned. My concern, I have to be honest with you, around HL2 is I don't think it'll work in sort of fairly high hazard environments. Battery life I'm still not sure about, and actually the occlusion of normal vision in low light, particularly if you're in stairs or going down wells and things, is going to be particularly difficult. So we've actually gone down a different route as far as hardware is concerned. Okay, so let's talk about some of the challenges that we're currently trying to deal with. So the first question I really have is that if we use VR, and we do, to train our operators on how to deal with dangerous and complex situations, does that make us more vulnerable to security concerns in the future? So for example, we may have a tank which contains 3 tons of toxic gas. If we conduct a security and a safety exercise in VR, identifying critical control points and modes of failure for that tank, and we train people how to deal with that, and that information then leaks out, is that a cybersecurity risk which makes us more vulnerable? And that's something we're wrestling with at the moment. We can practice making those fast decisions, which is very important, but the fast decisions need to be right. But the other question I've really got is, does reaction time in that environment equal health data, which equals selection criteria, which could equal unconscious bias in terms of employment law? So again, we need to be very careful about how we're actually handling all of that information. Psychological effects of immersion are evolving. We know about some of the ill health effects. I was at a talk earlier with the Google VR Earth presentation in the main hall, and they were talking about some of the way round the issues they've actually dealing with. I'm interested in that Sony Health Threshold PSV VR patent. I don't know if anyone has seen that. So feedback from the device, looking at sort of eye movement, sweating, body temperature, to try and minimize your time associated with the environment. But the legislation is certainly lagging as far as we're concerned in the UK. And I'll throw this one out there in terms of virtual crimes. So we're probably all very familiar with domestic legislation around discrimination. But if you have 3 or 4 members of your employment team in a virtual world, and one of that team virtually bully somebody else in that virtual world, does that make you as an employer responsible for that act? And this is where the legislation is looking at the moment. So there are a whole load of challenges that we really need to be careful of in terms of VR. So here's just an example of the digital twins, and we'll have a look very quickly at that 3D overlay that we use as far as point cloud is concerned. A couple of bits of note here. On the left is the photo, on the right is the digital twin. So operations, very busy. So we say to them, we're going to turn up on site and we're going to conduct this 3D point cloud scan. So they tidy the site up. Very interesting and of note is you'll notice the crucially important traffic cone, which is in the middle of the photo on the left-hand side. And for those of you who can just see it, there's a little roll of blue paper tissue, which is obviously crucial to the work that the guys are doing. So those will appear later on in the video. But you can see how the 3D point cloud scan then, that we then demonstrate and roll back on the wearable devices actually flow through. So here is a sort of typical medium rendered 3D point cloud scan for the operational assets. So the operators then can use their wearable or tablets device to walk through the asset, actually pick up points of interest, click on that individual item, and it will pull back technical data around the item or the service history or the maintenance record. And as I say, once again, we're back to the cone and the blue roll. In terms of the challenges we've got around AR, I guess one of the key concerns for us is around intellectual property, data capture, and copyright issues. So we are rolling out AR. We may well be in customers' houses or in the public area. If we are using our remote assistance tools and using AR at the same time, we are streaming that information back to our control center, where somebody may be guiding an operator on a particularly complex task. I'm not sure we've fully considered any GDPR requirements in terms of privacy legislation as far as streaming that information back is concerned. A talk I went to yesterday mentioned about the automatic pixelation of individuals' faces, but we're not able to do that at the moment. So I'd be particularly interested from hearing from people who are able to currently do that. Another challenge for us is both the AR overlay positioning, but this whole issue about conflicting instructions. So if you can imagine in a high pressure situation, you're presented with a whole series of valve arrays. Some work to turn clockwise, some turn anti-clockwise, some are levers. How are we making sure where an operator thinks that the lever should turn clockwise, but the AR instruction is telling him to do something different? We need to make sure that that conflict of information is put right in the first place through either thorough testing or UAT or whatever it may be. And there is this overriding belief that the technology is right. I tried to find some examples and I sort of gave up in the end, because even last week in the UK there were some great examples of where people were just doing the craziest things because, for example, their sat-nav was telling them. There was a guy who drove his lorry into a river last week in the UK simply because his sat-nav told him to do that. You only have to Google. I'm not saying you Google while I'm talking, but if you Google Pokemon deaths, AR or whatever, there's a whole series of issues in terms of, have people actually, unfortunately, been killed by people playing Pokemon Go or done stupid things whilst playing Pokemon Go. So AR is out there, but I think for us in a high hazard environment, we need to be very careful about how we make sure that the information we present to our operators is correct and that the data we collect meets any GDPR and general requirements. So this is a typical part of a process operation. So this is just one very small piece of one of our wastewater treatment works. And I wanted to touch on how we were trying to link through sort of IoT our control systems for this piece of equipment there. Just in the background, the two circular objects are giant gas holders. So there we keep huge quantities of under pressure, well, they're high volume, low pressure, but there is some pressure there, explosive gases. So there's a great example in reality of if we train operators on how to manage a gas leak in that environment, does that then make us more vulnerable to a cyber attack associated with the release of that gas? So these are questions and dilemmas that we are currently wrestling with. So let's just touch on, as we sort of draw to a closure, some of the IoT challenges that we have. So for us, in terms of maintaining sort of excellent customer service in terms of drinking water quality and dealing with the wastewater elements, there are certain things that we know, our known knowns. We can generally predict demand data. So we know that if we have a prolonged sunny spell in Wales, I know that's a fairly unlikely scenario, but occasionally we do get the sunshine, that our water usage will go up as generally people water their gardens. Somebody mentioned about people filling their swimming pools, but the weather is never that good in Wales that we fill our swimming pools. So we've generally got some known knowns in terms of demand data. We know what process chemicals we need. We know roughly based on demand data how much and how many and the quantity and the type of chemicals that we'll need. We tie in all of our SCADA information. So we have in terms of how we run our systems, we have parallel systems. We have a general network and a secure telemetry system. So the telemetry system completely isolated, but we can get our SCADA information in terms of machine operations, chemicals, deliveries, all of those things to try and automate that process, building into that whole IoT ecosystem. We do simple things like we measure silo weight, we measure throughput of chemicals, and we can automatically liaise with our suppliers to ensure that chemicals arrive on time rather than just in time. So we'll go for an on-time delivery because obviously it's crucial that we get continuity of supplier. And we're fascinated. I've been with the water industry for sort of 12 years, and I never really was particularly interested in the weather, but I'm absolutely fascinated by the weather now. So for those of you who don't know, anyone in the water and sewage sector just wants it to be constantly drizzly all the time. We don't want lots of rain because that causes us problems with hydraulic overload, and we don't want too much sunshine because that pushes up demand, so it needs to drizzle all the time. And then there's Charlie, and Charlie is not a processed chemical, as some wag pointed out the other day. Charlie is our individual and operator, and we've just successfully rolled out, with really careful negotiation with the trade unions, a sort of employee tracking process. So we now know where Charlie is in relation to his geographical location, and more importantly, we know where he is on site. We know when he's going to be on holiday, we know what his shift pattern is, so we can then factor in all of those elements, pulling together that IoT ecosystem controls. I just touch on the hardware we've chosen. I have absolutely no connection with RealWare or Interware, but we use Interware Workflow for delivering our workflows, and we use their RealWare HMT1 for our wearable devices. It works for us. Whole shift battery life. They make an intrinsically safe version for our explosive atmospheres, although we try and avoid operators going into explosive atmospheres. Very good noise cancellation, so the voice commands work in even very, very noisy environments. And it's essentially a 7-inch tablet at arm's length. You've got to get the arm set up properly, but once it's set up properly, the actual whole idea is very good. One of the key advantages for the HMT1 from our point of view is the fact it doesn't restrict that peripheral vision. So some of the other devices that are out there at the moment have got fairly thick sidebars, and peripheral vision can be impacted. So we've successfully been deploying the HMT1 for a couple of years now, and actually we use them inside dams, we use them in wet wells, we use them underground. They're pretty robust. So just as I finish up then, risk assessment is really important for us. So generic risk assessments just don't cut it, so we have to be very bespoke, very analytical in terms of how we measure and manage risk. Human behavior I've touched on, particularly if you think about visitors and children accessing our assets, so we have to focus on those elements as well. Risk tolerance is an interesting area as well. So each one of us sitting in the room today have a different view of risk. Some of us will do skydiving, while others will think that's just a completely nonsensical activity to be doing as a recreational process. But that risk tolerance needs to be taken into account as well. And the other issue, I guess, is a challenge, really, is if we plump for a piece of kit or a new piece of technology or a new process, does that early adoption force us to succeed? So is there self-imposed pressure on me to succeed and take more risk to try and deliver an output for the business? So it's something we're very mindful of in terms of what's happening. We are members of AREA. AREA really have helped us over the last couple of years. This is their safety informatic, which I know we are working on to bring a little more to life, but it really distills into a single slide everything that we've really talking about in terms of sort of health and safety and occupational health risk management in that MR environment. So just as I finish up then, why do we do it? Well, we do it because we think it's the right thing to do. We think it drives increased benefit for our customers. It reduces costs. It reduces risk. It increases repeatability of the work that we do, and it helps non-specialist or less specialist operators actually undertake complex tasks in the environment. So this is where we're going. This is our next element as well. I hope we don't end up in the true sense of actually what happens at the end of Aldous Huxley's book, but it is a brave new world for us. I'm looking forward to new technology. I'm looking forward to some new wearables. I'd like to see battery life increase. I want full shift battery life. I think we could do some self-charging, whether through kinetic motion or whatever it may be. I think 5G is going to be an option for us. Can we do more cloud computing and just receptacle back into the device? And I want all of this for a lower price point as well. So don't charge us as much for the hardware as well. Thank you very much.
Super, Gary.